Hello and welcome. I am Angela from Angela and Then Some. Tonight's big question: does destiny exist, or is life all about free will? We're just going to give chat a bit of time for those of you who are just joining in. Welcome once again. I hope you're having a great day. We showed up today. I personally am a bit tired, but I did not succumb to the fatigue, and I had a very productive day. So we're like super stoked about that. Okay, so from ancient myths to modern science, people have wondered. People have wondered: are our lives already written, or do we shape them with every choice? For those of you who are just joining in, drop it in the chat if you think destiny exists, if you think free will is where it's at, or if you think it's a mix. Do you believe more in destiny and free will kind of coexisting and mingling, or are you more pro destiny or more pro free will? Let me know in the chat just so we can begin uh, at a starting point of knowing where we're at. I personally, I think it's a little bit of both. As I dwelled, like super delved into this week's like studying a little beforehand, there were some thoughts and things that I was able to find on YouTube and like some videos that I will also put in the comments or in the description of this live once everything's said and done that I found particularly interesting. Don't worry, only like two or three. I'm not gonna like bombard the list of so many, and I won't ever put videos that are like an hour, 2 hours, because I'm just not about that. I'm about like succinct, informative. Let's get this going. So personally, I think destiny and free will both play a part. I like more so. I have a hope that destiny plays a part. That maybe the stars aligned when you were born to show kind of what you're supposed to more or less kind of go to, or what your trajectory is supposed to do. Best case scenario for you to grow as a person. But of course, you to an extent have free will where life could literally hand you those lemons and you could be like, no, throw them in the trash. Hopefully you make better choices than that, but that's what I think the matter. Okay, so first, when we talk about free will and destiny, I think we have to kind of mention Carl Jung. I think that's how you pronounce it. I personally am very familiar with this psychologist, as I was a psychology major back in the day, so that was one of the pillars of psychology, if you will, that you kind of read about him. So if you ever taken a psychology class, maybe just intro to psych, let me know in the comments if you're like, yes, the name rings a bell. That's the other guy. But Carl Jung discusses a lot of his work was about, I think, shadow, integration, individuation, integration. Those might be mixed around. But the shadow self essentially was discussing what it sounds like. The Hyde to your Dr. Jekyll, the quote unquote bad to your good, but not necessarily bad. It's more so that which you had to learn to keep hidden. Either it could be genuinely bad traits that we label as bad, or it could just be things that were originally who you were, but maybe as you grew up, depending on like your childhood or something, maybe you were very outspoken, maybe 2 or 3 year old loved to talk, and you were just like, I love talking. And then somewhere along the lines, something may have happened, like say an incident or a couple, or even small, very small incidents of people telling you to be quiet or lower your voice, hush, things like that. So you learned to stop talking or stop, you know, speaking as loud, or just stop like speaking your truth pretty much. So then that could be something as you got older, you were always maybe known as quiet, shy or what have you. And then that is part of your shadow self, where that person who wants to speak, who enjoys talking, who wants to just, gab or be authentic is, wasn't allowed to flourish. So that could be part of your shadow self, your shadow work, things like that. He discusses shadow self and then unconscious drive. Essentially, I think if I can kind of recall, is that the unconscious drives of like if you are being led by your shadow self more or less, like that's just something you haven't acknowledged within you. Maybe you're being pushed to speak publicly or confront the shadow aspects of yourself, those things that you bury deep within. And so even if you're not actively consciously trying to do better or overcome them, it could be something in your life that is unconsciously a driving factor. I think it's part of like sometimes people have an idea, like maybe in their core, that they should be doing something, like a gut feeling, stuff like that. I think that would go into the unconscious drive. And then I think Carl Jung also stated, like, if you don't know who you are as a person, then your unconscious or shadow self could be leading you places that you don't realize are like, there's a reason for this. I think, there's so much things to recall. One, how's everyone doing today? Like I said earlier, so like I said, drop in the chat if you think destiny exists, if you think free will is where it's at, or if you think it's a mix. And I already gave my 2 cents about my thinking of it being a mix. So with the shadow self, Carl Jung, and the unconscious drives, he also talked about synchronicity as modern fate. Synchronicity, he was saying that when things seem like the universe aligns or your own day-to-day life aligns with certain things. Um, I'm probably screwing this up a lot, but I'm just a lady on the internet. Just if you have anything to add, please write it in the chat and let me know your thoughts. But like synchronicity as modern fate, meaning that trying to collect my thoughts. How to frame this right? That as things line up, your unconscious drives, your shadow self, if you're not aware of all that, things can sort of sync up and seem like coincidental, but in the positive sense of like, wow, well, not necessarily positive because depends on your perspective, positive. But maybe you've always, like I said, the example is staying quiet, and then you just kept being, things kept making you go on stage. Like maybe you wanted to do X, Y, Z, and they're like, oh, you have to do a speech for that. And you're like, dang it. Or you have to go and talk to this group about that. And it's, things like that where you want to be in the limelight or you want to speak more or less, and then things just keep kind of putting you into that area. I think so. Synchronicity would be modern fate, so that would be like fate leading you more or less. Like that is destiny. You were always destined to be there or something. I think it was him and Freud. If you ever took a psychology class or majored in psychology or anything, they're the two guys. Freud himself, they had like a falling out at some point, which kind of like, okay. I think Carl Jung was younger than Freud, and he was saw Freud as like a mentor. And at some point, they had a falling out in the sense of what they believed. Carl Jung kind of made, as he got older and grew up and got more into his own psychology and all this stuff. He thought people should be uh, like holistically looked at, like mind, body, and soul, kind of like everything. But Freud, if you're familiar with Freud, he's very much, in my personal opinion, a product of his era. He was like a Victorian, during the Victorian era and everything, where modesty and what's the extreme level of modesty, sexual repression and all that was kind of thing. So a lot of his way of looking at psychology, of psychoanalyzing people, were stuck in that time frame. Now, obviously, it still has merit, in my personal opinion. Obviously, still worth a look see, but um, for that, in my personal opinion, uh, it's definitely a product of its time. Um, but pretty much Freud stated that there's like repetition compulsion, like depending on where you're stuck in your, I want to say, layer of like id, ego, and like super conscious or whatever. I'm not an expert on it. Wherever you're stuck in that layer, you'll pretty much be just repeating those same cycles. I don't know, not an expert. If you have an opinion on the matter or anything to add in, feel free. Uh, the neuroscience now shows that unconscious decisions are made before conscious thought, meaning that it literally shows that even if you haven't decided on A or B, somewhere in your mind, there's already neurons that fire, already say A, already say B, before you make conscious, logical sense of your gut feeling or your thoughts or things like that. So that's kind of interesting that somewhere in you there's already a template of you're going to do this or that's what you want to do. that's interesting when you think of destiny, fate, free will, the crosshairs of what actually is what actually is destiny, what actually is considered fate, and what actually is considered free will. When it all kind of, if you've ever seen the Good Place, it all kind of Jeremy Bearamy's around. So, chat, have you ever caught yourself repeating a pattern? Like life decided, hey, you need to learn this lesson, so we're gonna keep this going until you learn it. For me personally, let's see. I think mine was perfectionism and staying very much in my in my head, pretty much. Where staying in the theoretics, staying where I guess where it's safe, where you can think your thoughts and then be like, oh, that'd be cool if I did this, but then not actually following through doing it. Not because you think, oh, I can't do it, but in the sense of perfectionism, where you think I need to be over here when I complete it. I can't be here, barely did something, or here I have to be here. But the point isn't being like the point isn't getting it perfect. The point is getting it done. And I think that goes for a lot of things we all learn in life. It's like you learn what needs to, that it's not about perfection, it's about progress. So even a little bit gets something done, even if wiping down a counter, if you need to clean your house, wiping a counter counts. It totally does. Personal experience, wiping a counter counts as clean. But I think, yeah, so if you ever caught yourself repeating a pattern or a life lesson that you just kept running into, let me know in the chat and we can discuss it. Okay, now we're going to go to our next segment, which is religion and spirituality and the aspect of destiny, free will, and fate. This is where it gets very God centric, but also I learned a lot about Islam and things that they believe, and it's way, way above my pay grade in the sense of understanding the text and the difference between it's called like Kadar. There's actually like subsections of it, if I'm correct. If I remember about like divine plans and then also responsibility and accountability. But also there's like way, way more stuff discussing accountability, responsibility, even if things are preordained, if destiny is the thing ruling everything, if God already knows if you're going to go to heaven or hell, why does it matter if you do good or if you do bad or if you pray regularly or if worship at the right times? That's what that goes into. So it's it's intense. Christianity, we could talk about like divine providence, God's plan versus free will. When I was looking up stuff about this is something I've encountered in my own personal experience concerning Christianity. Is a lot of the time uh, people like to take, if it's God's will or God's plan, as I will not be doing anything to be held accountable or responsible for it or to try to change it. And that's where I think even watching some of the videos I watched to study and like reflect, it was like frustrating, that aspect, because I think I've experienced this in my own personal life, where if you start not plucking holes in someone's logic who is very much Christian, or the whole quote, "Get behind me, Satan," as if you're the one, you like, as if you're the one like attacking their faith, when you're like, no, I'm genuinely trying to ask questions and figure out what's going on in there. But when it comes to God's plan of free will, same with the aspect of like when churches say when you have your problems, give it up to God, which I totally agree with, like giving it to a higher power, let it be, amen, things like that. Um, but also knowing what is in actually your control. What can you do to make things a little bit better? Steps you can take, and things like that. So that's kind of was my little hesitance or issue with Christianity. Let me know if you've run across this too sometimes, where you're like, bro, you got to take responsibility. Um, then we go into Hinduism and then Buddhism with karma and dharma. I honestly could not tell you the difference right now. But let me know in the chat if you remember. I know karma is about, like, involves reincarnation. I could look it up. That's true. I have a computer here. But this is a discussion for all of us to enjoy together. So, yeah, karma and dharma when it comes to Hinduism slash Buddhism. And also, just a reminder, these are the lives, these are the uncut, full me talking live, but I also will have the abridged versions out. I'm currently working on the first episode the first live we did back in September. The abridged version will probably be out later this week. So if the lives just aren't doing it for you, or if you love the lives but you would love to see more of my edited humor and things added in for funsies, that will be the abridged versions, which will be coming out in the next following week. So like this video, subscribe, and then even comment. Let me know if you're super excited for that abridged version. Um, but yeah, then even I can't go into Hinduism, Buddhism as much because karma, when it goes into reincarnation, um, what you've done in the past and things you have to like relearn or learn again because you haven't settled more or less that debt kind of thing. But I can't discuss Dharma because I honestly do not recall it or remember. So if you do remember, write in the chat, or even better yet, write in, like, if this is a later date, just write in the comments, be like Dharma is, which I actually might do. But furthering into like new age soul contracts when it comes to the religion and spirituality aspect, I had an actual experience with a psychic a few months back, maybe 6 months ago. I was on a little day trip, and then she mentioned to me soul contract, like she was just talking that she's like, you sitting here with me right now is also a soul contract at some point in our soul level cycle of like not this human physical realm. She was explaining that in the spiritual realm that we had agreed to meet here at this place and discuss what we're discussing now. So that was a very interesting thought, thinking like, is it destiny that brought me here, not just being in the car, seeing a place that said psychic and just being like, there, go. I've been wanting to see a psychic. Let's just go see what's about. So that's very interesting to think of in the sense of soul contracts, destiny, free will. What was a random day trip turned into, going to see a psychic, which I'll let you know on a real level. Some of the things she said actually have happened in, not in the exact way because she get kind of loosey goosey, but definitely she mentioned things were going to start happening in the fall, and I just so happened in September to start doing these lives, and we're continuing the lives. So things are moving. So yeah. So on a personal note, chat, do you believe your life has a larger plan? Or is it 100% like your choice? Like, is there destiny going on where you're like, I am meant to go from this place to this place? Or do you think you can do whatever you want? And well, yeah, I think that kind of goes into determinism. Um, Determinism is a really weird thing to wrap your head around, but it's essentially like you do have the choice, but your choices are predetermined. Like, it's kind of like you can eat this, like the green apple, you can eat the red apple. But the point is, you're going to eat an apple today. So it's kind of like you get choices. So it's like, not, I want to say the illusion of choice, but it's not really because you do get to choose. That is legitimate there, but it just goes into this weird line of what is it that you're getting to choose and what is it that it's going to happen no matter what. So I think for me personally, I hope my life has a larger plan. Um, Maybe since I personally subscribe to the idea of reincarnation, where our souls kind of chose a certain path to take when we came back here to try to help itself develop further. So I'm hoping that she knew what was up and kind of like, no, there's a plan here. But some days I'm like, girl, I don't know what I'm doing. But I think the choices are like how far you're gonna go. Maybe there's a predestined area you're supposed to get to, but it's like many things in life. Maybe it's a spectrum. So maybe you start here. You're supposed to, at the epitome of what you can do in this life, you're supposed to be here. Like that is your destiny. You're fully like, I have fully embodied, I guess what Carl Jung said, like individuation. I have integrated my shadow self. I am become a whole human being, mind, body, and soul and everything. But sometimes maybe you just get here or get there. Or maybe you do make it to there and you're like, wow. But like many things, it's progress over perfection. So the point isn't getting to quote unquote the end or the best possible outcome, but it's getting closer to the path, right? Like getting further than you were yesterday or getting further in this lifetime than you were in the last one. Yeah. So, chat, speaking of all of this when it comes to destiny or free will, is it scarier to think the idea that everything is already decided, like you have no say in the matter? You will get married at X because you will meet so and so at this time. You will have this many children at this time. You will buy a house this time. You maybe lose your house at this time. You get old and you sell your home at this time. So is it scarier that everything's already been decided or that nothing is? Like you could say, you're supposed to marry this person at this time, or you will meet them at this time. But maybe you're just like, no, I don't want to meet anybody ever. I'm staying home. Then if destiny is predetermined, maybe it's like things you just had to go to, maybe high school, maybe college functions, maybe a wedding of a friend, thing, or maybe even a funeral, things you were just obligated to go to, and then you still run into that person. So yeah, what's scarier? Type it in the chat if you would so inclined and would love to share it. Is it thinking everything's already decided, you have no choice, it's happening, or that nothing is, that you have all the choice and you're the CEO of your life, and you're the CEO, you're the employee, you're the time management specialist. It's all you. I guess I would lean into like that. For me personally, nothing is scarier. Like I'm just the kid without any training wilderness. It's like good luck, buddy. Go down that hill. That is, I think, a bit scary. You know that. Like I said, I believe more in the destiny and free will being a little mixture. So maybe you have a map on that bicycle, or at least a general direction of like, I need to keep going there. So even if you fall off the bike, you're like, well, I'm just going to walk the bike now. Or you have to get off the bike and then the bike's messed up because you made some bad life choices. And now you got to walk, but at least you have somewhere you're going to. So I think it's much scarier in my mind to, if there's like nothing, like good luck, buddy. Yeah. Concerning destiny and free will and myths and folklore. I think we've all heard of the Greek fates. If not, reference Hercules, the Disney Hercules. They were totally in that movie. The Greek fates, the three sisters who, uh, one weaves, yes, one weaves your life's thread, another one decides how long that thread will be, and then the third one cuts it. Fun fact, they later were appeared as like three sisters and eventually like three old women, and eventually they were appeared as like a young woman, middle-aged woman, and then an old woman that kind of became like mother maiden mother crone type of thing. So interesting. So that's in Greek mythology, which is actually kind of interesting. I know there was somebody in Greek mythology. Let me know if you know in the chat. There was somebody in Greek mythology who convinced one of them to not cut, like to wait longer to cut the thingamabobber, the thread. I know there was one guy, I can't remember his name, um, but the three fates showed up when he was a baby near the hearth. The fire was going, and they told his mother, once that log is burnt, your son will die. So the mother extinguished the log, hid it in like what is hid it in a chest or like a container, and then he grew up. He was healthy. He was like a very strong person. He went on like guess, raids and like did amazing like feats of strength and things like that. But then at one of the people he made friends with, I think Athleta or something along that lines. Don't quote me on it. I'll figure it out at some point. But she was a female warrior who was pretty much, I think, abandoned in the forest. So she's like was super strong, agile. She knew all about the forest. And then I think he was the one who fought the boar. I can't remember the first part of the name, but something in boar. It was a fabled creature of sorts. But he fought the boar, or they did, because he had a group of people, including the Athleta. And since she did like the first major blow that gave them the chance to actually kill it, he was going to give her the head of the boar, which was like the trophy. And then his two uncles who were with him at the time, who also went on the expedition with him, kill this boar. They were like upset about that. She was like a woman, and things like that. So ooh, sexism. But so they, I think, stole the head and were just like just being jerks. And so, in like a fit of rage, because he had a bit of a temper, he attacked them and subsequently killed them. So when he was returning home, mind you, whenever he went on these adventures, his mother was always happy because she knew that he would be safe and sound because the log was put away and it wasn't burning, right? So when she saw him returning, she was like, "Yay, he's safe! Of course he's safe." But then when he told her that it was his, that he had killed her brothers, that's who his uncles were, in a fit of rage on her own, which kind of shows you genetics of them being both rageful. She ran back to her house, got the log out, threw it in the fire, and let it burn. And then that's when he like collapsed. And it kind of, in the way the story is told, it kind of makes it seem like, oh, he could have had a heart attack or something like that, because he had just done something very athletic, but killing the boar and fighting, and then killing his uncles and all this stuff. But yeah, so that's the story of that. Not very positive, but that's a story concerning the Greek faith that I know. I know there's the Norse Norns, but I do not know enough about Norse mythology. Excuse me. I do not know about enough about Norse mythology to get into that. I know there's like fairy tales and things that discuss destiny, fate, free will. I think was it the famous one back to Roman or Greek? But Oedipus, where it was his father was told that his son would kill him and then marry the mother, and so they left the baby out in the forest to like die, and then someone else found the child and they raised him, and then when Oedipus found, I think he went to I can't remember the lady's name, but the oracle or whatever, and then she told him what his fate was. He was like, no. So then he didn't realize he was adopted. And so he left his adopted parents, unbeknownst to him, adopted parents. And then that's when he, along the road, when he was traveling, met his father, unbeknownst to him, killed his father subsequently, and then went to the town, eventually found his unknown father's wife, and then eventually, slept with her, married her, and all that stuff. So it's kind of one of the things. Would, destiny, free will, would it have been different if he had known, if his father hadn't given him up? Yeah, it's just one of those weird Jeremy Bearimy head twisty things, right? Um, but if free will exists, why do so many people repeat the same life patterns? It can, and I think that goes back into the psychology aspect of either Freudian or Jung psychology. Jung psychology. I think maybe there's certain life lessons in the spiritual sense that we're supposed to come across, or supposed to I don't want to say pass. I don't think it's more of a spectrum. But I think, yeah, but if you go to the Freudian aspect, it's really just repeating patterns from like your early life and things like that. I don't know. Why do you think, Chad, if free will exists, why do so many people repeat the same life pattern? I was earlier today watching a video, a webinar concerning like healing and trauma, So it's discussing the psychology of like big T trauma, which is like the major trauma where people think of like, oh, there was an incident, something occurred, and of course that made a lasting impression on somebody like in their childhood or in their life. And then there's like little T trauma where enough little things either happened that were that created a pattern in someone's life. Um, I can go back to this example. It's one thing of like a traumatic event with big T trauma is like saying having like a major event or something happen embarrassing like on a large scale, I guess. That's if the more positive aspect of it. Like if you were doing a speech in front of a bunch of people in elementary school and suddenly you flubbed a line, you said the wrong word, you said an inappropriate word maybe or something like that, and then everybody laughed at you, people are pointing. Um, Maybe you eventually got in trouble for XYZ after you got off stage, things like that. That could be a mild big T traumatic thing where you're just like, nope, I don't go on stage or talk in front of people like that anymore. But it could, actually have an impact on you. But the little T trauma in that regard would be like people just telling you to shush. We don't want to hear you talk right now. Be quiet. Those little tiny microaggressions, little tiny traumatic events that will just instill something in you. So if we go to that, that could be why so many people repeat life patterns. Because you can go to the psychoanalyst aspect of just early childhood um, things that happen in their life, or you can go the more spiritual but also psychology route of Carl Jung, where he's like, there were certain life lessons you're put to be here for, and like shadow self, the unconscious drives, those are all leading you, unbeknownst to you, to repeat certain lessons until you fully integrated them and learned from them. So I think even in like when you think of pulp culture, there's like the Matrix. I think in one of the Matrix movies, I think maybe the third one, when the Oracle, or maybe the second one, the Oracle is talking to him. In the first one, she talks to him about, I think she said, "Don't worry about the vase," and he hits the vase. But then she said, "What really will cook your noodle later is if you would have broken. If would you still have broken if I hadn't said anything? Because when she said the vase, he said what vase, and then turned and hit the vase. So yeah, so it's like destiny, fate. What um, was the option for her where he may hit the vase or not, and maybe that little 5 or 6 second interlude is something that later on, when he got into the elevator and all that stuff, it lined everything up precisely. Where if they didn't have that discussion, maybe he would have, Trinity would have got into the Matrix through the phone, and he also would have got to the phone in time. But she knew that he needed to have that confrontation with Agent Smith. So maybe that 6 to 8 seconds of them talking like that was her choice to slow it down, because the option was for them to have that confrontation or to not. And maybe having that confrontation was for the better, because eventually from that confrontation onward, Neo was able to like awaken his true self. So it gets intense there. I guess Star Wars kind of destiny and free will, because I think Anakin was predestined. I think in the prequel they explain how he was supposed to bring balance to the force, but they were looking for somebody like that him. Not huge fan of Star Wars. I haven't watched like everything, especially not the prequels. Um, but yeah, so that's interesting. Like they would have just not looked for him, left him on the planet. Would it have just been fine? Would everything been cool, or would someone else have? Well, Palpatine probably would have still been Palpatine. Um, so yeah, I don't know. But then Luke wouldn't have been born. Leia wouldn't have been born. So Palpatine still Palpatine. Um, then Luke wouldn't be teaching other Jedi's later and things like that. So destiny or free will, or was it determinism, where technically you have a choice, but these are your choices. So yeah, I think that's an interesting and a different way of looking at it. So chat, what's your favorite story or movie about fate versus choice? And did you agree with how it ended? Let's see. I'm trying to think. We have The Matrix. That definitely has those. Star Wars has some aspect. Moana. Yeah, she decided to leave the reef. So yeah. Um, I don't think I personally have a favorite. I have a few that are interesting, are of note. Um, but I definitely know there are. I can't recall right now, but there definitely are movies that I've watched where I was like, this shouldn't. I've literally called that out watching movies with my husband, where I'm like shenanigans, or like shenanigans. Like I'm just like this movie doesn't make any sense. So I guess myself suspending disbelief is a difficult thing for me when it comes to movies. So, quick poll chat if you would be so inclined. Do you think we create our path step by step, kind of like the free will aspect, or do you think it's already mapped out? Destiny is destiny. You are here to do what you're supposed to do. I guess that kind of seems kind of sad if you're not sure what you're here to do, and if you're someone who's later in life already, and you're still like, I have no idea. I have done nothing of note. But it's free will. If you feel maybe you're in your 40s, your 50s, or even 60s, and you're like, I've done nothing of real note, or at least to yourself. Maybe to other people, they could pick out a few things. But maybe to yourself, you're just like, nah. That, I guess, is when free will would come into play. And that is your chance to be like, hey, doesn't matter if you're 40, 50, 60, 70, maybe even 80. You can do what you can do. Maybe doing something of note is just starting a garden in your backyard and be like, look how pretty that looks. Maybe something of note is commenting on some videos and getting to know people outside of your circle if you're not going to go out. Maybe things of note could just be like, I started getting in better shape, and then the next, maybe you're even like 65, and then the next 2 or 3 years you get into really good shape, and you're like, that is of note. I brought myself up from being like sickly or something. Free will does play a part even in my own logic here. So, oh, look at, okay. I'm reading my notes, mind you, but they're much, much better than the first time we did this. The first time they were way too long. I thought I needed them to be a little bit on the long side so I can fully remember my thoughts, but no. Um, Bringing to science and philosophy, that's where determinism comes into play. And then, we already discussed determinism, multiple interludes. Then it goes into physics, which I did study some of this, and like some things, we are not all experts in things. That was a bit above my pay grade. So if you're interested in the physics of it all, I know cause and causality and things like that. That was interesting to learn as I learned it then, but I should not even attempt. And then there's stoicism, where you can't necessarily control fate, but you can control your response. I've actually seen that kind of popping up more. Not really pop culture, I don't think, but I think in the YouTube sphere, or the way of thinking, stoicism, or maybe it's just my algorithm. That's been popping up a bit for me. Um, so, do you think science disapproves destiny, or could it actually explain how it works? Answering that question for myself, I've been interested a lot in astrology lately, and numerology and things like that. Not as a hard science, mind you, but more as just connecting some dots, seeing what's what, using myself as an example, but also maybe I pick people of note that I know what their life led to, and then I look up things about their planets, alignment, even like their asteroids, which is very interesting, and then see what would be the most likely outcome for somebody with this dynamic. And it's been really interesting to see, like, 60 to 80% of that time, it definitely at least points their destiny or fate was in direction that they did what they did do. So on my own astrology stuff, I've been looking into that to be like, well, what am I supposed to do? Because I'm one of those people who, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, but we're here talking with you. We're trying to build community, have a good time, discuss things. Um, So yeah, thank you for showing up. It means a lot to me, honestly. But so that's what I've been looking up in that regard of my own science and spirituality combination. Because even if you don't necessarily believe in astrology, it's still something, or even numerology or the ologies in general, psychology. They're all interesting aspects to them. So even I think even the science aspect, if you're like a little more anti-science or don't know about these doctors, uh, when you look into certain things, it's just interesting to entertain the ideas, take note of them, maybe take literal notes if you have to, and then just kind of like play around with ideas. I think self-awareness and understanding yourself from value systems to what you actually care about is very important in our lives. Let's see. If I could share one personal moment that felt fated or perfect, like too perfect to be random. Hmm. Well, here's an interesting thing. When we talk about destiny versus fate versus free will, right? When I met my husband when we were 16 in high school, I ended up dating someone else who still is a great, good friend of mine. That was, I wouldn't say the healthiest first relationship, but it was long term. We were together numerous years. We learned a lot. We're still great friends. So, foundationally cool. My husband went off and lived his life. We kept in semi contact, just like, how are you? Doing great. Merry Christmas, those type of things. Happy birthday. Um, but then at a certain point in my relationship with my then boyfriend, every so often I would have dreams where I was either trying to talk to or contact my husband, but he was just a friend that we were in semi contact with. We weren't super close. We were friends, but not like, yeah, not super close. And he lived in another city and all that stuff. So the dreams were just enough, like in frequency, every like 3 to 6 months, just a dream for me to be like, if I hadn't texted him recently, I'd be like, hey, just checking in, how you doing? Everything here is great. So that was the tether that kind of just kept going there. Um, by I think my mid-ish 20s, my then boyfriend at the time, we already had known, we discussed it, and we already had known like for the last year or two of our relationship that we were not going to get married. We didn't have the same like value systems. One of us wanted kids, one of us didn't. One of us wanted to get married eventually. One of us did not see that in our future. So it was more like we were loyal, we were friends. So why rock that boat, right? But then, as our relationship was coming to an end, where we were like, okay, I was thinking about maybe going to a different school to finish my degree, maybe in a different city. All this stuff was happening. My husband ended up moving back into our city. I'll get to you, Ricardo. Let me tell my story. But thank you for the comment. Um, he ended up moving back into the city, and then this where free will comes into play. I then told my then boyfriend, like, hey, like he moved. My husband did move back in the city. It was like 2 or 3 months afterwards, where I was still, me and my then boyfriend were dating. We're cool, but we already knew that there was an end point at some point. But why rock the boat, right? And then there was an event coming up that my then boyfriend had invited me and my sister, other people to go to. So super excited about that. I did invite my then husband, but I didn't really think he was going to show up. But then my boyfriend at the time, the day of the event, was like, "Oh, by the way, I'm not going to be able to go." And I was just like, "What? You invited all of us to go, and you're not going?" And so that was pretty much the last straw, more or less. I guess repeating that pattern with him of being like, "You know what? I think we're done, bro." And so it was just like, let's just not do this anymore. And he agreed. No, odd, but we were just like, no problems there. And then my husband, I happened to have texted him while I was getting ready and saying like, yes, it's still on. We're all still going, all this stuff. And then after like an hour or two of being at the event, he was like, okay, I'll go. Um, and that's when pretty much we reconnected. We started dating, like going on dates from then on, and then eventually dating. So it was kind of like free will and fate were kind of intermixed in my own personal experience. So I think that's why um, I am more interested in seeing destiny and fate and free will interwoven, where you have choices that you can make. There will be certain benchmarks, and you can make the choice here, or you're going to have to wait, and then you're going to still have to make that same choice, kind of thing. But maybe different people, different examples, different um, life development stages, I guess. Ricardo states, I think destiny exists in the way that certain things can be predicted with pretty high accuracy. Yeah. We can figure out where we, sorry, my eyes, and I'm like, I had dinner way too close to the live, and I apologize. We can figure out where our lives are going based off what we have done. That's true. So I guess was it destiny and free will, a combination of both, where depending on like your life status and stuff, like what you're born into, you can kind of get a good idea of your predetermination, your predestiny of like what's expected of you. Now you can obviously say, nope, not doing it, and go live on that boat or something. But and then you can also like, yeah, even like I think psychology wise, you can figure out somebody by getting to know them in certain basis. So you can kind of make a pretty good like scientific guess of what they're going to do. Yeah, thank you, Ricardo. So, chat, have you ever had something that felt like destiny? Um, that story that I just shared with you, I didn't really think of it at the time as destiny, free will, fate aspect, but it was more so in hindsight when asking myself that question. I'm like, oh, I do have something. Um, Also, chat, if you could know your destiny in advance, would you want to? I mean, that would kind of make things helpful. I think that's kind of like, I guess, part of my strategy, like looking into numerology, astrology, kind of seeing where the path, quote unquote, says it should go, to kind of get an idea. And I think, visiting a psychic or getting your tarot cards read or palm read is kind of that way of figuring things out. But for me personally, it's more just entertaining the idea of being like, I wonder what someone's going to say about this. So yes, Chad, if you could know your destiny in advance, would you want to? Let me know in the comments, either now or if you're watching this later. It'd be terrible if your destiny was not good. But then at the same time, you would know maybe why it was not good and when it will not be so good. And so maybe make the best of it the time you do have. Olivia states, I think knowing destiny will make someone stuck with anticipation. Yeah. Uh, I think there was a movie, Big Fish, where the dad in the story, he discussed that when he was a child, he saw a witch in like the swamp, and then she showed him when and where he would die. So pretty much throughout his life, like I think he even went to like war and all this stuff. He knew like, nope, I don't die here. I know that. So later on in the story, when he is passing away, it's a tall tale for sure. So some of what his dad told him was, take it with a grain of salt. But he had his son tell him the story of how he dies because that was the right version of like, yep, that's how I die. Um, Olivia states, you'd miss out on so much in fear knowing what's coming. Okay, that's reasonable, but I also think there'd be a lot of people who just want to know. You know, uh, Ricardo states, yes, it would be. I would be the best at what I'm supposed to be if I know I can get ahead and be better. Ooh, but would that be too much pressure? If you're knowing you're supposed to get to this, like, echelon, I don't know, this tip top tier of something, and then you're like here, but it says you're supposed to get up there. would you feel like, yes, I can do that because I know I can get up there? Or would it be like, that's a lot of pressure knowing that I'm supposed to get up there? Um, yeah, so I think that's kind of what Olivia was going in with her original comments of you can get stuck in anticipation or too much fear knowing what's coming. So very interesting. All right. Thank you for those who joined the chat. This has been Angela from Angela and Then Some. We looked at destiny through psychology, religion, a little bit myth, a little bit pop culture, science, and our own personal experiences. And if you are watching this later in the abridged version, feel free to comment still. I would love to hear anything we discussed in the chat, either the abridged version or the long version of the original live. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear if you have your own instances where it felt like destiny and fate um, conspired against you, or where you felt like you chose free will and you did something different. I would love to hear their thoughts. To those in the chat right now, drop a word. Let me know if what sums up your current belief. Is it fate? Destiny slash fate? Is it free will, or do you think it's a mixture of both? I still personally think it's a mixture of both. I think we should always remind ourselves of like accountability and responsibility, not only to ourselves but to others. So like, still show up, do your best, do best by your according to yourself as well as to others. But also know there are some things that just aren't in your hands or in your control. So yeah, thank you all for showing up. If you enjoyed this conversation, please like the video. It helps tremendously. Comment if you feel so inclined, and subscribe, of course, and then join next Tuesday at 7 p.m. We will be doing another deep dive. I cannot recall what it is right now, but you can follow me on Instagram as well as at AngelaAndThenSome. That is where I post the full calendar for the month, and you can see what's coming up. And also on Thursday at 7 to 9, so about 2 hours. On Thursday, we'll be doing our live game night, just starting this month. We'll be playing Date Everything. It's a fun game. So if you're into like simulation games, or was it maybe otomy? I've never heard it pronounced. I just know it's spelled how it is spelled. Into those type of games, or even just into quirky or weird or odd games. Date Everything is definitely something. Uh, it is something. So we will also be playing that on Thursday at 7 p.m. and we'll be slowly but surely ramping it up to be more Halloween themed as the weeks progress. So thank you so much for joining and the comments. It was extremely helpful, and I will see you all next week. Bye.